Hey, FDS listeners. Are you looking for a new true crime podcast to binge? Introducing Forensic Tales. Hosted by me, Courtney Fretwell, Forensic Tales is a weekly true crime podcast with a forensic science twist. Each episode features real, bone-chilling stories to satisfy your inner forensic science and true crime itch. From fingerprinting to criminal profiling, we've got every investigative angle covered. Forensic Tales covers cases including well-known serial killers to cases you've probably never heard of. Some cases have been solved with forensic science, while others have turned cold. Forensic Tales is available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. That's Forensic Tales Podcast, a podcast that reminds us that not all stories have happy endings.
Hey Queens, are you ready to level up? Then join our Patreon at patreon.com/The Female Dating Strategy, where you can find weekly bonus content and FDS commentary on all the latest pop culture, relationship, and dating news. If you just want to listen to the extra bonus content, we have the Lurker Mode tier on our Patreon. If you want merchandise, access to the private FDS Patreon Discord, which also includes a monthly book club with FDS and feminist-themed books, as well as FDS merchandise, t-shirts, mugs, and the opportunity to discuss topics with the FDS Podcast Queens live, as well as submit stories for our Rose to Scrote Queen and narcissist discussions on the podcast itself. So if you'd like access to all this and more, visit our Patreon at patreon.com/The Female Dating Strategy. What's up, Queens? Welcome to the Female Dating Strategy Podcast, the meanest female-only podcast on the internet. I'm Ro.
And I'm Savannah.
And I'm Lilith.
All right, we're going in on Love is Blind this week.
Yeah. This is going to be an extended roast to scrote, so sit back, buckle up, and enjoy it, ladies.
We've only watched the first 5 or 6 episodes because the second set only came out last night, so...
This is part 1.
This is part 1, and then this is our first impressions, and then we'll see how everything shakes out at the end of the season. So stay tuned.
Yeah, I think for this episode, we're going to focus on, what are some of the early red flags, some of the early tells, some of the early mistakes that the women made.
And roast the absolute shit out of every single man.
Yeah.
Practically on that show, because they deserve.
I think we're going to go couple by couple, but the first, even in like the first 5 minutes of the first episode, there was this one guy who I guess got cut from the show. He was like, I've never been in love except for my mother. And I was like, red fucking flag. I can see why you didn't get picked, okay?
Gross.
Gross. Okay. Anyways.
Let's talk about a few of the one-off characters like Trish.
Yeah, Trish. Yeah, before we get into the couples, let's talk about Trish.
I have so many friends.
Okay, first of all, Trish and Shayne are literally the same person, except she's like the female version of Shayne. They're both real estate agents. They're both blonde, and they're both narcissists, right? And they both have delusions of grandeur, literally. I have so many friends. I have so many Instagram followers. I'm so good at this pod thing because with my car, I have like...
At any given time, I have like 5 to 20 people in my car because I just have so many friends. You guys pretty much all like me, right?
What was like really cringe was when she thought that Nick would choose her over Danielle and he went with Danielle.
Yeah.
Because she thought she was, like, out of Danielle's league. And I thought that's quite a shitty thing to say as well. Like, I didn't really... And then when she was like, I post loads of workout videos, they could see how hard I'm going. And Nick was just like, what the fuck?
I loved, like, the rapid cut of all of the men reacting to Trish, just, like, their head in their hands.
Yes.
I do love Nick.
What was wild is how she went back to the room with the rest of the women and was like, yeah, so it's pretty much that all the guys are in love with me, so I don't know how I'm going to choose. And then there's like a super cut of them reacting like, what is this woman?
That's what I mean, delusions of grandeur, right? Like,
yeah. So she's very humbled. I think she actually deleted her Instagram, which only had about 8,000 followers or so.
8,000, yeah. No.
Because people just kept coming on there being like, wow, this is pretty sad. Like, no one picked you, etc. So yeah, she was a one-off character we never saw again. And then there was like the silver fox guy.
Apparently he did actually get engaged.
Yeah, they didn't show all the engagements on the show. I think they left 2 couples out.
Yeah. They only chose the most toxic couples, I guess, for entertainment purposes.
So I read some tea that said that basically production said the first 6 couples to propose would get to go on the Mexico trip. So there was a little bit of a time pressure there.
Okay.
Which actually makes for good TV in the sense that probably the most toxic people that wouldn't vet people properly would take those first 6 slots. But then the 2 couples that didn't propose fast enough didn't make it. So then they might have been a little bit more normal. But I don't know if that's official, but I just read that on Twitter. So take that with a grain of salt.
So which couple do we want to do first? I want to do Shayne and Natalie first, because we already mentioned Shayne and how Trish are the same person, basically.
I also want to save them. Do you want to save them?
Save them for last?
For like the grand finale, because they have the meatiest discussion, I feel like.
Okay. So let's actually go chronological then, like Nick and Danielle.
So my personal thoughts on this was that I think out of the men who got engaged, I think that Nick carried himself the best, especially when he was interviewing the women. He made it clear that he was still keeping his options open, but he also made it clear to Danielle that he really, really liked her. And the other men didn't do that. And we'll come on to that in a bit. But I just thought Nick, he really carried himself really well. It's a bit too early to call him high value, but I really found myself liking him during the pod phase.
Like, he had a few quirks on the Mexico trip where, you know, like making his own toothpaste. That's fucking weird.
I don't see what's wrong with that, personally. Like, what's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with it. It's just...
And personally, I absolutely love my smellies. Like, if a guy told me I met my own shower gel, I would be totally on that. I absolutely love that stuff. But that's just me. That's just a personal preference.
As long as it's shower gel that actually, like, smells good. Yeah, if he's using, like, essential oils and stuff, like, okay, that's cool.
I would be all over that shit.
I don't know. Danielle comes across as, like, very insecure, and she did sort of trauma dump pretty early on, I think. And, like, you know, the whole fight that they had in Mexico about, because like she was sick with a stomach flu and he went out to hang out with people, and she was like, she said something like, oh, you know, because of the way I look, I'm insecure, and there's always going to be a girl who's skinnier or hotter than me. And I'm like, girl, like, why? Like, I don't know, like, you're not benefiting yourself by having that attitude, right? Like, even if you do feel insecure, like, never let a man know. Like, don't project that shit, right? There's no benefit in it.
She ruminates on it to the point where I think it's actually a legit mental health issue that she should seek help for. It's not just like normal insecurity where you feel like you have a fleeting self-consciousness about the way you look. It's like, it's an obsessive process for her to the point where she can't function in any type of relationship. She doesn't have a good relationship with herself, obviously, but it just seems like that's taking the front and center of all of her relationships. And if you focus on, first of all your flaws, and you start to alienate people because you're so insecure that you're just like constantly testing them and constantly getting mad at them for not validating you all the time, that's going to drive people away. So I feel a little bit bad for her.
Yeah, so like Trish and Danielle are like the opposites. Danielle has like undeserved insecurity. Like, she's not ugly. Like, she's pretty, right? She's got a cute face. You know, she's not like obese or anything. She's got an all right like physique, I guess. You know, so she's like way less confident than what she deserves. And Trish is the opposite. She's like way too confident for what she deserves.
That's quite common with people who've lost a substantial amount of weight. I think she said she lost like 80 pounds, is that your brain doesn't really catch up, and it's very easy to get body dysmorphia. Like, you'll see a slim person in the mirror. This happened to me as well. But then you'll see the overweight person like staring back at you. And it's a real thing as well. And you're just constantly worried that people will judge you for previously being overweight. Like, luckily, like Nick didn't, but I feel like if Danielle had gotten in front of someone like Shake, it might have been...
Oh, I want to drag the fuck out of Shake later.
He could have actually fed into those insecurities as well.
And didn't Nick say he was also overweight, if I'm not mistaken?
He said he was chubby growing up, but I don't think Nick was, even if he wasn't, he didn't strike me as the kind of person that would have judged her or looked at her any differently.
Yeah, Nick seems all right. He seems like a solid dude. I mean, of all the men, him and Sal are probably the... I'm hesitant to say high value, but like the least low value.
They're the least shitty. Yeah, they're the least shitty.
Yeah, like they're probably my favorites, Nick and Sal. When Nick proposed to Danielle and, you know, they saw each other for the first time, I was like, oh my God, that's so beautiful. That's so cute. I'm so happy for them. kind of thing, right? So, I hope things get better in terms of their communication, but like, yeah, hearing them argue, it's like, what are you even arguing about? You're arguing about literally nothing. Like, just stop.
Yeah, she's massively insecure and she's sabotaging herself. But yeah, the first time they kissed, you could feel that they had the biggest emotional connection out of everyone. So I think that's part of why initially you just kind of want to root for him, and then it seems like Danielle is just slowly tearing it down.
Yeah, my advice for women is like, be confident. Don't be like Trish confident, but like...
And is Trish confident though? Like, somebody who has to flex that much to strangers, that's not the sign of someone who's confident. It's the opposite.
Yeah, that's someone who's like secretly insecure and like is projecting that.
She's very insecure. Hugely insecure.
That's the thing with narcissistic people, is like deep down they usually are very insecure, and all of that like outward flexing is just to sort of overcompensate for it. But like, what I'm saying is, I don't know, there's certain value in like going out there and talking to people and just like being I don't know, even if you are an insecure person, it's almost like fake it till you make it. Like, if you show that you believe in yourself to other people, it's like other people kind of almost go along with it, but you have to be believable, right? So like, the problem with Trish is she's not very believable, but I definitely will tell women, like, even if you are insecure, even if you're like working on leveling up, going to therapy and stuff, like, in the meantime, until you get there, fake it till you make it, right? Like, just project confidence.
Project, and like, don't internalize your own like shame, like just sort of externalize it. Like, why the fuck does anybody else care, right? That's how I felt about it, especially if you're just starting your weight loss journey or your fitness journey or whatever kind of journey you're on. Like, you have to have a certain level of like, fuck you looking at, like, I don't know how to say it like that, but like, because I hear women and they're like, I'm insecure to go to the gym because I'm overweight and I don't want people to look at me. You have to have Trish energy in that type of situation. I'm the shit. What the fuck is everyone else looking at right now?
But here's the thing, like, and I find like, if I just walk around just like beaming with like confidence and just really like being in love with myself, like, most people see that and they just believe me, right? Like, that's the thing. It's
most people aren't even paying attention to you, to be honest. Like,
yeah, true.
If you're feeling insecure, remember that you don't matter to most people. That's the first thing to remember.
Well, in the gym, yeah, if it's mostly strangers, yeah, keep in mind, most people are not looking at you or paying attention to you, but like, or the beach, yeah. But I'm saying, like, if you're going into, say, an office environment or even like a group dynamic situation, like, if men can smell desperation, men can smell insecurity. And I guess Danielle is just lucky that Nick, he's the kind of guy who, I don't know, maybe isn't the sort of guy to like take advantage of that. But there are men out there who, if they sense desperation and insecurity in you, they will take advantage of that and use that to manipulate you. And that's why when I go out in public or in a dating situation, when I'm talking to guys, is just being really like self-assured. Be really careful about trauma dumping too early, ladies. Like, I don't know, just don't be like Danielle. Don't be blatantly insecure like that. I don't know. It's self-sabotaging.
Yeah, just keep it to yourself. And
don't give other people ammo. Anyways, what's the next couple? I want to do Shake and Deep.
Deep is another person who lost a lot of weight. And you can see just the massive difference in how she approached it versus how Danielle approached it. Even in the face of someone who was antagonistic like Shake was about women's weight.
I want to say, actually, first of all, Deep, I mean, she seems like a really sweet girl, like a really nice person, but I really broke my heart when, there's this supercut of Shake, like, asking all the girls, would I be able to lift you at a music festival on my shoulder? Or what was the other question he asked about, like, to find out their weight, right? Or he asked about their dress size, or...
He's such a tool.
Like, basically trying to find out if they were fat. Most of the women, Iyanna and Mallory, like, they had this look on their face, like, what the fuck? Like, most of the women there who had, like, a modicum of self-respect would just immediately reject that guy. Like, even women who aren't themselves fat. Like, if a guy was saying something shitty about overweight women, even if it's not something that applies to me, I'll still be like, oh, this guy's a dickhead, and I still wouldn't want to date him, right? And so it made me kind of sad seeing him say that sort of stuff to Deep, and her just being like, oh, okay, and just sort of glossing over it and just being fine with it. I don't know.
Because then she had to sit there and ruminate about how she's going to tell him that she actually lost a lot of weight, right? Because she did tell him sometime after the fact, after they, I guess, had quote unquote bonded. But at the same time, I think she should have cut him off, like you said, when he was first making those pointed questions about her weight. And then secondly, this is the thing that turned me off the most about Shake, when he started talking about, oh, I usually date blondes. And I'm like, blonde is a hair color, not a personality trait or any type of description of a person. Whenever a guy talks about his exes like they're a porn category, fuck them. Like next.
Yeah, he seems really, really shallow, and it's like, if you care that much about looks, why are you on the show?
Right.
I didn't really get why he was there.
Yeah, it kind of bothered me that they tried to do a character arc for him, like, oh, he realized that he's only shallow because of his own insecurities. And now that he's communicated with deep and formed an emotional connection with her, now he doesn't care about physical appearance. And then they fucking meet, and you're like, oh, so he does care about physical appearance.
He does care about physical appearance. Yeah, he doesn't find her physically attractive.
Every 10 minutes, he was talking about, she looks like my aunt. I'm just not physically attracted to her. There's just no physical connection to anybody who would listen, which is just, I mean, it feels cruel, right?
Yeah. Imagine being her and watching that show after it gets aired, right? Like, I would not want to be married to someone who's ever said that about me, right? But I don't know. Shake, I don't know. He seems like the kind of guy that, like, all of my exes are blonde. Like, he seems like one of those, like, colorist scrotes that we talked about in the Scamming Men.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely very colorist. 100%.
You know, in our episode of Scamming Men in Solidarity, how, like, you were bringing up how, like, the curry cells and the rice cells, for example, they fetishize the idea of being with white women because they associate that with status, and to be with someone from their own race, even if a woman from their own race is attracted to them, it's like it doesn't count for them because they just don't value that sort of female attention, which is really a shame and really, like,
it's really sickening and just pathetic in a lot of ways.
Like, Shake is the exact sort of guy where if he said any of that shit to me, and I've met these kinds of guys where, like, they'll say something so colorist in my head, I'm like, I'm gonna traumatize you so bad you'll never even think of dating another white woman.
My God. We got in trouble for airing that last time, but Lilith, don't apologize.
It's true. Why should I keep that to myself? It's true. And you know what? More white women need to have this attitude of, like, it's not a compliment to be the preference, okay? Like, just because he's nice to you and shitty to other women, that's not a compliment to you personally.
Yeah, and the way he talked about his exes anyways, it just seems like one big giant neg. Like, he just looked at them as a category. Yeah, they're blondes. I'm like, well, I'm sure there was something else more to them than that, hopefully, but perhaps he kept it very surface level because, well, first of all, he's just very surface level and didn't want to, like, give up any power in that relationship. So he just basically says, like, I'm dating a certain type of woman that he feels like he can exert power over. Because he just seems like his whole personality was contrived and built to just constantly neg women, almost like Tom Haverford from Parks and Rec, but unironically. Like, he's basically him.
He's Aziz Ansari's character, unironically. Yeah.
Unironically, though,
yeah,
he's like, I'm a DJ. I go to festivals.
No, but there actually are. The thing with Tom Haverford is, like, there actually are men out there who are like that, who behave in that way. I've met men like that in real life in the dating world, right? Where, I don't know, it's like, how do I say this? I don't know how to say this in a way that doesn't sound racist. I don't know. Maybe I'll cut this out. But, like, they're so desperate to try to be white that, like, they'll just betray the women from their own race to do that or throw them under the bus.
I mean, I have to say, it does feel a little bit secondhand cringe watching two brown people talk about how much they don't date other brown people and how they only date white people. And I feel like,
I know, right? Date whichever race of man treats you the best, right?
But I think it's dumb to not be leading with the people you've dated rather than their race. If you're just already, like, talking about the fact that they're a race, you have racial category preferences, or like, oh, I would never date anybody like this. It just makes me feel like you're not connecting with people. You're just filling a void that you have because of your own internalized racism, which is clear what's going on with Shake and possibly with Deep T too.
Yeah.
No, I mean, with Deep T, it makes sense because, again, like, if a lot of men from your culture are like Shake or very misogynistic, it makes sense that you wouldn't want to date them, right?
It isn't always just down to that as well. Like, some women can have internalized racism. It's quite a complex issue. It's not just down to the fact that the men are shitty, because some of them won't be as well. And also, women can also internalize the idea that white means status or white means improvement as well. This is why I say it's a really sensitive topic.
Yeah. So Deep T and Shake finally meet, and the first thing he does is grab her butt with both hands. Like, that was so creepy.
That was such a red flag. Oh my God.
Oh my God. It was so gross. He was like, I want to show her I'm attracted to her. So I'm going to grab 2 handfuls of her ass. It was so bad. And then he's not attracted to her. So why did he do that? It was like, he just groped her for no reason.
I mean, I did think it was cute when he like touched her feet. I was like, oh, that's kind of cute. Like, you know, because she said how, oh, you know, if we get married, I'm not going to touch your feet because, you know, we're equals kind of thing. So he touched her feet. And I was like, oh, that was kind of cute. I actually like that. But then he ruined it by whispering into her ear, I'm going to get you pregnant. We're going to have babies. That was so fucking creepy.
Shake's been reading Pickup Artistry and Red Pill because a lot of the stuff he does is so contrived and
pickup artisty. Yeah,
it's pickup artisty and the over attempt to be masculine and dominant, and it just comes off a little bit stilted and emotionally immature. That's what a lot of these Red Pill guys look like in real life. Or these pickup artist guys.
Yeah. If you want an idea of what a pickup artist red pill type looks like in real life, just look at Shake. That's exactly what they're like.
And he's mid. Some of them are way more obvious, and then some of them are a little bit more smooth, but like not by much. So he's probably on a little bit more smooth to a person who is not familiar with the culture, wouldn't necessarily pick up on it.
Another thing that bothered me about Shake, the future faking, right? So when he first meets her, he's like, we're going to get married. We're going to have babies. I'm going to get you pregnant. Like he's telling her all the things that she wants to hear. And then when they actually meet in Mexico and she starts saying those things back to him, like oh my God, the clip of her like cuddling up next to him and like saying that stuff to him. And then you can see his face. He has that like kind of like cringe face. That just like felt like a stab to my heart, like knowing how like you know, she's so into him and he's like not into her. And he said, oh, it's because I'm commitment phobic. No, bitch. That was a deliberate manipulation tactic when men say what you want to hear, like right from the get-go, to get the girl thinking, oh, he's really into me. Oh, he must really like me. And then he pulls back and goes like, oh, you know, it's so fucked up and like actually evil to say that kind of shit to a woman and play with her heart like that. And then come back and like when she says that to you to act like, oh, she's being desperate and clingy. Fuck you.
I suspect him as well as Sal that they were going along with this because they wanted to be on TV because they know it can raise their profile. Because even the people that don't have a successful match by the end of the show, they could get more Instagram followers and then like just have a bunch of thirsty fans. So he's a guy I feel like was just going to say and do whatever it took to be on that Mexico trip.
To be on TV, yeah.
Yeah, that's the impression I have of Shake. That's why he did the 180 afterwards, because like it was all bullshit to begin with, but then he needs to have a storyline to stay on the show, but doesn't want to actually touch deep tea.
Exactly. And it's so heartbreaking to me that he was constantly saying how like physically unattractive he thinks she is. And even worse is like seeing her sit there and like rationalize like her being like, I'm so into him. I'm so attracted to him. He's so great. Even just seeing the way he does this and this and eats food and everything. I'm so into him. I don't know. It just felt like, girl, like blink twice if you need help if you're being held hostage. I don't know.
And it's okay if you don't find someone attractive. What's not okay is just to
play with their heart in the meantime.
Stringing them along, keep dating them, keep telling other people how unattractive you find them. Like, that's really not cool.
Especially to everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. He should have just broken off the engagement if he wasn't feeling it. Like,
yeah, it's fucked up that everyone in that show knows that he doesn't think Deep Tea's attractive, except Deep Tea. Like, she's the only person who doesn't seem to be aware, and it's just, I hate him, honestly. I want everyone to know from the bottom of my soul, there's just a deep pit of like seething hatred for men like Shake, and I just want to destroy them.
I hope Deep Tea says no.
So the next couple is Sal and Mallory.
Sal and Malvador.
Malvador. Salary. There you go. That one's actually better. Like salary. Yeah.
Salary.
Collect those coins.
I want to say, first of all, Sal is my favorite. I think he's cute. But I don't know. What do you think, Ro? Maybe you don't like him. I don't know.
See, I watched a little bit ahead. But my first impression of Sal was, yeah, he seems like very emotionally straightforward, seemed pretty grounded in himself.
And wholesome and cute. Yeah.
Yeah, wholesome and cute. Yeah, I don't know if we have any specific criticism of him because he didn't really do anything except for, it seems like, be genuine up until this point. They played like the never have I ever game, and he seemed pretty accepting of Mallory. Both, I think, like her tattoos, like he kind of didn't really care. He wasn't like, I wasn't sure if he was going to be the type that was going to be like more judgmental, a little bit more traditional, but he didn't seem like he was fazed by that.
I think it's cute. He plays the little ukulele. I don't know. He says cute little like words in Spanish. I don't know. He's just a little adorable, flirty little guy, right? And so I think that's adorable. But Mallory, I don't know. She is low key kind of. I like her. Like she's the sort of woman I'd probably be friends with, but I'd side-eye her.
She's a pick-me.
She's kind of a pick-me, right? Like,
she's definitely a pick-me. Like, she's very much I'm not like other girls vibe.
Like, she's like, when she was talking to Jarrett and being like, I'm just such a guy's girl, like, I just love sports. I'm like, girl.
To me, that's a red flag in a woman. When if they say that, it just, I mean, to me, it gives me the impression that they over-identify with men and they try too hard to identify with men, and I find that very off-putting.
I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with liking sports as a woman.
No, it's not that. It's just that the way she was like, I'm a guy's girl. Like, it's just pick me.
And also saying she watches porn, that was kind of weird.
That's kind of my thing with Mallory, is that I think she gets off on being like the wild one, right? I think where it got a little bit weird was at the end where she has sex with Sal, and then later when Sal confronts her about a conversation he has with Jarrett, because Jarrett wanted to propose to Mallory as well, and then Mallory turned him down for Sal. And then at the meeting, basically goes to Jarrett and says, I don't know what, I think she said, I don't know if I want to get married. And like, they're basically flirting and kind of saying that like this entire thing's bullshit, right?
Well, he asked her if she wants to get married and she seemed unsure. He also made the comment that she didn't get a gold ring. Like, she said with Jarrett that she wanted a gold ring. And I guess Sal didn't get her a gold ring. He got her a silver one or something, or white gold.
She didn't seem like she was all that into Sal when she was talking to Jarrett, right? And actually, when they first met, Mallory says, I'm not attracted to him. And then somewhere down the line changes her mind, so to speak, or says, oh, I was just overwhelmed. And then says she's attracted to him and then goes on trip with him to Mexico, which again, so the question is that production prodding? Meaning like, was she not attracted to him? And then the production was like, oh, well, now you got to go to Mexico, so you need to fake it. But then she did have sex with him, so maybe she was attracted to him on some level.
I don't know. I thought it was weird when she's like, oh, I'm just like so awkward and like quirky or whatever. I'm like, first of all, girl, if you're awkward, don't say you're awkward. Like, I don't know. I find people who say I'm being so awkward, it's like, even if you weren't even being awkward, it's like you're making it awkward.
But I didn't get the flip-flop from I'm not attracted to Sal to I'm very attracted to Sal. She didn't seem like she had made up her mind or that she was sure.
That's the thing with all the women in this show generally, is they all seem to be like unsure of whatever guy they're with, except for maybe Natalie, but most of them seem sort of like on the fence, or like they're like, oh, there's something wrong. Like Mallory even said the first time she met him, she was like, like there was something not quite right, something off or whatever. And then she just sort of rationalizes away that feeling. I want to tell all women, if you meet a guy and you have that feeling of like, something's not quite right, this doesn't feel right or whatever, listen to that feeling. Trust your gut.
Yeah, she might not be attracted to him. I don't know what the type of guy she has dated in the past look like. It could be a physical thing where he's just not physically her type. But again, if she dates guys that are into sports and like Sal's like this sensitive guy who plays the ukulele.
That's my type.
But maybe now that I'm thinking about it, like maybe she was trying to genuinely, immerse herself in the experiment and like date against type. Right? Because it seemed like also Deep and Shake did that. They're dating against their type. So she's dating a guy who is more sensitive, listens to her. He's not like a big sports manly man type guy. So she's dating against type, and then she meets him and realizes like, I'm just not attracted to this. So that could just be it.
Maybe, yeah. But yeah, she is kind of a pick-me. I think Sal's adorbs. Set him free, girl.
Yeah, so moving along to Jarrett and Iyanna. So we can talk about the Mallory-Jarrett situation first and then move on to Jarrett and Iyanna. So Jarrett basically liked both Iyanna and Mallory, but had a clear and above preference for Mallory. And he proposes to Mallory, and then Mallory turns him down. And then they meet later on when they go to Mexico, and they have a little exchange where like Jarrett's clearly trying it with Mallory, right? Like basically like, let's get out of here, you and me type of thing. And she doesn't really reject him and like soundly or anything. She's just sort of, he's basically like, do you want to get married? He basically kind of pulls a Shaina, where he's questioning everything about the relationship.
Oh, and we'll get to Shaina.
You will get to Shaina. But yeah, he's basically trying to say like, oh, I would have been a better match for you, is the point of that conversation. And she doesn't really reject that. So she seems like she's unsure as well, which I guess, it's a weird situation, not blaming her for being unsure. But I think she should have been way more honest with Sal, rather than when Sal asked her about it, acted like he was crazy.
Yeah, that was so mean.
Yeah, because she got really defensive. Yeah, that was kind of like a thing on Mallory. I'm like, Mallory, you should have just told Sal, listen, I'm not exactly sure how I feel about this right now. Or even if you want to say like, I'm not sure, or I need to sort out my feelings, that's vastly preferable than acting like the man's crazy.
The thing is, I'm not even sure if she liked Jarrett more. I got the vibe that she just liked the attention.
Yeah.
Because remember, she turned him down. Like, she didn't like him enough to accept his proposal. I think she was quite lukewarm about the two of them. Or wasn't lukewarm, but she wasn't super enthusiastic about the two of them. Although, that being said, it's clear she doesn't find Sal attractive. So maybe when she saw Jarrett, she found him more attractive physically.
Yeah, that's what it came across to me, that like she just found Jarrett more attractive.
Or more her normal type. I want to go off on a rant about the concept of types, because I don't think there's anything wrong with having a type, right? And in fact, I think it's a fool's errand to try to force yourself to be into someone that's not your usual type. There was a post on the subreddit a long time ago that I saw in like my early days of FDS before I was a mod and stuff, that was like, you know, if you're not his physical preference, dump him, because even if he's dating you now and he seems somewhat attracted to you now, if you're not his main preference, then he's either going to like cheat on you with a woman who is his preference, or like he's just not going to like truly value you or like see you as that important. Like, I don't know. I always tell women, like, always be with a man who thinks you're like the most beautiful woman in the world, who's like where you are exactly his physical type, because there's nothing more heartbreaking than like being with a guy where he's like, yeah, I like her personality and like, yeah, we get along great. But, you know, I just don't find her attractive. Like the situation with Deep Tea and Shake, right? It's just like so mentally exhausting and emotionally like heartbreaking. It's like hurtful to be in that kind of situation, right? And so, yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with being attracted to or having a type or just wanting to be with your specific type. It is foolish to try to force yourself to be attracted to someone you're not attracted to.
Yeah, it's very tough, because I always wonder if people mean like, oh, date a different type, if they just mean like emotional type, because you can still have like a range of physical preferences, but just date a guy who's emotionally different than the men you've been with in the past.
Maybe, but like if you're the sort of woman where like you like tall men and something you find really attractive in a man, like I don't think there's any point in trying to force yourself to be attracted to a guy who's shorter than you, just so that like, to what? Like to prove a point, to prove love is blind? Like,
yeah,
you know, like what, to prove some kind of like idea or moral lesson or whatever. It's just pointless to me.
Well, people sometimes fall back on caricature. So let's say like, oh, you dated a bunch of guys who were into fitness, and then you're like, I'm never dating any more gym bros. And it's like, well, did you only date the guys who are into fitness who were gym bros? Because there's guys who are into fitness who aren't gym bros. You know what I mean?
But yeah, like there's guys who are into fitness who are not dickheads, right?
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like you can date a type and have like, or maybe even like a lifestyle preference for your partner, but have like need to maybe break some emotional patterns in the way that you deal with people.
Maybe. I think that's different than type, though. To me, type is a physical thing. And so, yeah, I think I have, this is the thing that I hate about Love is Blind and why I hate the entire premise of this show, is I don't think that there's anything wrong with eliminating people from your dating pool because you don't find them physically attractive. I think it's fucked up that they get women emotionally invested in guys before they're able to do that kind of vetting.
I think the show proves that love really isn't that blind.
Yeah, exactly.
So the next couple we started on them.
Oh, Jarrett and Iyanna, yeah. Iyanna's adorable. Okay, she doesn't deserve this.
So the thing with Iyanna, she fell into the pattern of trauma dumping too early, and it seems like she had a lot of difficulties in her life, and I don't remember the entire story, but essentially she was adopted. So she was her mother couldn't take care of her. She went to live with some relatives. Those relatives ended up kicking her out, and then she ended up with some other couple that adopted her.
And she said she was also sexually assaulted when she was 17.
She's also sexually assaulted. So she talks about all of her trauma to Jarrett. Jarrett also went through something where he was like stabbed, which pin in that. Let's get back to that in a little bit.
Can I say, first of all, the trauma, like the way that he reacted to her trauma, he seemed bored. Like the look on his face, she couldn't see his face, but when the camera zoomed down on his face, he seemed to be like, he had this face like, damn, like that's heavy, like that's a lot, like I don't want to deal with this kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Then when he told her about his trauma, she was like, oh my God, that's terrible. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Like she was just like overflowing with empathy. I'm like, she's such a good person and she deserves so much better.
But that's the problem. So that's exactly the dynamic I wanted to highlight, because we talked about this in our 37 Lies You Were Taught About Men series, about how a lot of women think that exposing their traumas brings them closer to men, whereas men don't look at it that way at all. So you could see where she was like, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you, Jarrett. And she's feeling like an increased emotional connection because she thinks he accepts me, accepts all the traumas I've experienced. And then she's saying that she can't kiss, or like she doesn't like to do certain types of sexual things because of her sexual assault, etc. And Jarrett is also trauma dumping about whatever happened with him getting stabbed up, which again, pinned, because I want to revisit this in maybe the second half because I have suspicions about it.
No, what are your suspicions? State your suspicions now and let's see if it gets confirmed.
I'm trying to figure out how an adult man gets stabbed by his friend that's not drugs, money, or he was fucking with his wife. That's what I want to know.
Yeah. I had the same thought. I'm like, how do you get stabbed by your friend unless you've done something weird, right? Like,
I'm not trying to victim blame him, but at the same time, that situation, like...
No, I'm victim blaming.
That's very suspicious to me. I would immediately be asking a hell of a lot more questions about that situation because it's just not normal to be slashed up by your friend.
Unless you did something to deserve it, or precipitate it, that is.
Yeah, exactly. So unless his friend's like really off his rocker, it seemed like, more or less a crime of passion, but drugs, money, or women is probably something. He probably did something super foul. Even if he's like a street dude, like you just don't get stabbed for no reason.
Yeah. Also, it was weird to me that like he was like, oh yeah, I had this traumatic thing happen to me, and I realized I didn't have anyone close to me at the time to support me.
Right.
I get this a lot. I'm not going to say which sport I engage in, but I do know a lot of guys who they'll get a girlfriend because they want someone to take care of them. Like this is a sport that's very prone to injury. And so they'll get a girlfriend as like a sort of fail-safe in case they ever get injured because they want someone to take care of them when they're like incapacitated. But these sorts of men, like if their wife or girlfriend got injured, they would dump her. Like this is what and I've seen this over and over and over again where like the man gets injured, she spends months, years of her life taking care of him, driving to doctor's appointments, helping him with physio, spending years of her life trying to bring him back up on his feet. And if the roles are reversed, if she gets like, I saw a case of one of these men, his wife got breast cancer and he left her. Right. And so these sorts of men very, very seldom show the women in their lives the same courtesy. So if a man is saying like, oh, I need to get a girlfriend or a wife so she can take care of me, I'm immediately suspicious of these sorts of men because I'm like, would you do the same for your woman if she got sick?
Well, he didn't. He didn't even with Iyanna, right? Because he was not responding the same way to her trauma as she responded to him.
Exactly.
And he still wanted to go for Mallory. And so I wanted to highlight that specifically. We're saying like she's forming a bond and she says something very vulnerable to him, but he's not going to change his opinion that he wants a certain type of woman, right? And he's not going to be equally as reciprocating and accepting of her trauma as she was willing for his. And that's where it just gets really, really disappointing, but we just saw that dynamic play out that we're talking about, which is why we talk about just never lead with your trauma. If I was Iyanna, I probably would have saved the sexual assault conversation to like somewhere where you were more serious about having sex, and then like talked about boundaries, and maybe not even led with the sexual assault, but just talked about certain boundaries you have. And then when it came to her history with her mother and everything, I probably would have just said, I'm adopted, or like just leave it and then wait till you've met this person to talk about some more of the more heavier stuff, because you want to be seen as a person and not your trauma. But when you lead to your trauma, you only get people to latch onto your trauma. You're a person first. You are not your trauma. Your trauma is something that happened to you, but is not you.
Especially since the question that he asked wasn't even like, he asked her like, oh, how's your relationship with your mother? And that's when she goes into the trauma dumping conversation. I'm like, he probably meant it as like a light question kind of thing, and then she went really heavy. So I could see in his face he was kind of like this is really heavy, this is not what I was expecting kind of thing, right? And so I don't know, I just feel
right, he was expecting some girl to like completely just be his emotional sponge because he had a tragic thing happen to him.
And what I found really, really quite, I'd say probably the most awful thing about this whole season is the fact that he told her basically that she's second best, that he proposed to somebody else and she said no, and she still said yes. That can never be me. I don't know. I sort of think that that could be partly down to the setup of the show, because I personally think if a man proposes to a woman on the show and she says no, he should be asked to leave, because he shouldn't be able to go down his pecking order and find somebody else. I think that is incredibly cruel. And people are saying, oh my gosh, Jarrett was so honest about his feelings. I was like, I don't understand why men are applauded for saying something shitty or doing something shitty. Like, that is a shit thing to do to somebody, to basically tell them, I proposed to somebody else, she said no, so I'm gonna propose to you. Fuck that noise.
And you could see how insecure Iyanna was for the rest of the trip, right? Like comparing herself to Mallory, which was just...
I would be super insecure. He's literally told you he liked somebody else more.
And he went and flirted with Mallory.
That is just so disgusting.
I think Iyanna was smart to not have sex with him right away. Like, honestly, if I was in her situation, I probably would have accepted the second proposal just for the Mexico trip, but then kept him at arm's length and, like, not actually fuck him. So, if that's her strategy...
Pull a Shayna.
Yeah. I probably would have done the same. Just, like, take the proposal, go to Mexico, have fun, not fuck him. But, yeah.
I just personally couldn't even accept that. I just think my pride is too much to accept a proposal from a man who's told me that I'm second best. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, see, I have pride too, but I would want to humiliate him back, right? Like
I wouldn't even think he's worth it. I would just think he's trash, to be honest.
I mean, if we're talking in real life where there's no cameras, like if there's no cameras in real life, yeah, if I found a guy proposed to another woman and then 5 minutes later proposes to me, yeah, then I'd dump him. But for a reality TV show...
If I found out a guy got stabbed and was in the ICU and it wasn't like a random attack, I would have been like, man, you have a lot going on right now.
That's really tough for you.
Next, because because my reaction to that is like, I would have so many follow-up questions and my immediate reaction would be like, so drugs, money, or women? Why did your friend stab you?
Yeah, bro, you've got better street smarts than a lot of these women. Like, some of these women are like...
Yeah. She was like, oh, and I'm like, you're into some shady shit. I never would have felt bad.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. Just, if it wasn't a random attack, then if it's somebody you knew, I'm like, yeah, your life is messy, bro. Like,
yeah.
Especially at your big age. Yeah, no, he's just a tool. And a dusty. Okay, so moving along to Shaina. So Shaina...
And Kyle.
But Shaina and Kyle. So Shaina and Kyle, that whole thing with Kyle just like completely ignoring the fact that Shaina had different values than him, and then he kept like compromising his values every time.
Wait, should we summarize that for the audience?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so Kyle's the construction worker, and then Shaina...
There's a sort of love rectangle where... so there's Kyle, Shaina, Shayne, and Natalie. So Shaina liked both Shayne and Kyle, and Shayne liked both Natalie and Shaina. This is confusing, but yeah.
And Kyle was all about Shaina.
Kyle was all about Shaina, and Natalie was all about Shayne, right? Okay, first things first about Kyle, actually. I want to say, first of all, the first thing that someone asked him, like, what are your hobbies? And he's like, punching holes in walls. I'm like, okay, Satan.
But he's a construction worker, so I thought that was a joke.
I don't know. He just gives me like dark vibes. I don't know. Something about Kyle. He's got like, I'm not religious or anything. I'm an atheist, but he just seems like kind of like devilish in a way, like a sort of mischievous kind of. He's got like, even his face just looks like weirdly kind of like evil. I don't know. He looks like a little demon. I don't know. And he acts like a little demon.
He seemed nice enough. Like he seemed like he was more or less self-aware. I didn't really have any particular issues with him. I just thought it was interesting that he basically is acting like Mark, where he just wants to get with someone so bad that he just self-abandons completely. Like,
wait, who's Mark?
Mark was from season 1. Sorry.
Yeah, he's like a male pick-me.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like a male pick-me is basically what happened. And then on their vacation, he eats meat for the first time in 8 years. I'm like, why are you eating meat if you're a vegetarian? Wouldn't it make you sick? If I'm not mistaken, if you don't eat meat for years, if you try to eat it again, like you'll have extremely bad stomach upset because you don't have the enzymes to break down meat. Like your gut flora is completely changed. So I would be really, really surprised if he didn't get sick on that trip, which we don't know. But either way, Shaina left him in the dust. She turned in at like 7:40 and then said, oh, I don't want to have sex with you. I'm a Christian. And then like, so first of all, queen.
Okay, first of all, that reminded me of you. I was like, like when you're like, in that, what was the casual sex episode? You're like, oh yeah, I'd go into the club with my tube top, get guys all horny for me, and then be like, hey, first of all, I'm a Christian. So I was like, queen.
Yeah, first of all, back up. I love the Lord first and foremost.
Yeah. So honestly, I even though Shayna is sort of like the villain of this season, I kind of like her. Like she's kind of like an anti-hero. I don't know.
She clearly didn't like Kyle when she met him, so he just wasn't her type. So she was throwing everything as an excuse to him to get him to like not like her, but he wasn't getting it, and he kept compromising. I mean, they seemed like a cute couple at first until they talked about Christianity, because he's atheist and she's Christian, right? So there was even like a sort of record scratch like sound effect when
She asked about that.
And she doesn't believe in evolution, which I'm like, what the hell?
But I never found them cute because I knew she was always goo goo gaga for Shayne. And I found it interesting how she used religion as a reason to not go with Kyle, but I don't remember her asking Shayne if he was religious.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. She's using it as an excuse to dunk on Kyle, but
and it is valid. I think if your faith is important to you, then that. And I didn't like the way Kyle downplayed it. He was like, "Oh, do people break up over that now?" I was like, "Yes, religious views are extremely important." But Shayna didn't ask Shayne if he was religious. From what we can see, maybe she did and they edited it out, but from the conversations they were having, they were very non-religious conversations.
Yeah, he was always asking her what she's wearing and she'd talk about what she was wearing and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, it makes me so horny, babe."
You're so hot. He's so cringe.
Oh, he's so cringe. Anyways, yeah, so I do kind of feel bad for Kyle a little bit, but yeah, it's kind of I don't know, have some self-respect, man.
She's not into him, right? For whatever reason. Yeah, he should have just, it seems like for whatever reason, he really wanted to be with someone and really wanted to get married. So he was willing to compromise on some things.
Also, I think after he saw how hot she was, that's when he got more into her. He seemed to be like, "Oh yeah, I like her. I'm going to propose to her," before he saw her. And then as soon as he saw her, he's like, "Wow, she's hot. I'm going to debase my entire value system for this woman because she's hot,"
And there's some people that just aren't that committed to certain values. So I can kind of see where he's not looking at it as, okay, this is a huge deal or a deal breaker if I like her otherwise. But at the same time, I feel like she was so clearly saying those things to get him to not like her that he wasn't picking up on those vibes.
So, I mean, okay. So I want to say, first of all, as an atheist, I have been the sort of person like Kyle where because I don't take religion very seriously. And I also respect other people's beliefs, right? So I have dated religious men, both Christian and Muslim. And in all of these cases, I find that the fact that I don't believe in God and the fact that they believe in God just makes us incompatible just from the get-go. I think that, maybe people with different religions could date each other. But I think an atheist and a Christian person, actually, no, even people with different religions, it's your belief systems are generally so different and it's about life and death, right? And so, even if the other person means well and they're not trying to convert you in a hostile way, if the other person believes in God and you don't, they're probably going to think, if they really care about you, they're going to be thinking "Oh, my partner's going to go to hell." And they think they're probably genuinely concerned for your soul and so on, right? Thinking, I have to convert them, right?
That's true. I'd be really hard pressed to date a Christian man, but I also think it's somewhat different for men versus women because the religions are patriarchal, right? So they have expectations for you as a wife. It's not a personal thing where they practice it themselves and then try to instill values in their children. They're doing that because they have certain values they want to imprint on you as a woman. Whereas I think when women bring their religion in, it might be something they sort of teach their children, but it's not as expected that men follow or practice, where it's very hard vice versa. So even now today, even though I'm not a practicing Christian, I haven't really thought about my beliefs long enough to figure out if I'm an atheist, I'm agnostic. I'm just sort of well, I'm here. And that's all that matters, I guess. But I'd probably be hard pressed. I probably wouldn't date a Christian man at this point because I know that if he's Christian, he has certain values he's going to try to impose on me to live by that I don't want to.
And not even that, even if the woman is the Christian one, a lot of religious women, they expect their husband to lead them spiritually, right? And so if he's atheist, then that's not something that's going to happen in their relationship, right?
She did say that, I think. So I agree that in an ideal situation, women who are religious want their husband to be the spiritual leader. I'm just saying in practice, it's so much easier to be the religious woman. And then the man just sort of yeah, that's her little religion thing versus a religious man. He's going to want you to fulfill your godly role because these are patriarchal religions which support that ideology. He's not going to just be this is a personal belief that I live my life by. He's going to want to press that on women.
Yeah, I do know several families where the woman is religious and the man isn't, and it just works quite well.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, my grandpa used to show up. Sorry. So my grandma's very heavily religious. So every Sunday, my grandma's in church all day, every day, or all day she's in church every Sunday, and then sometimes during the week, and then she would always try to pressure my grandfather to go to church, but then he would go to church and be so embarrassing because he'd be in the front row, snoring loudly.
Yeah.
Like, he would literally throw his head back over the pew, like mouth open Homer Simpson style, loudly snoring during the middle of the service. And what's crazy about it, it's not like church services are quiet, right? So they have music and tambourines and everything going, and my grandfather is knocked the fuck out in the first pew.
Okay, that's embarrassing, yeah.
And I can see the pastor being like, wake up, like trying to get the person to like show people who were sleeping. But my grandfather gave nary a fuck. He was like, I work all day. I work really hard. Sundays are my day off. If I'm coming here, I'm going the fuck to sleep. So then my grandma stopped asking him. She didn't ask him to go anymore.
No, but this is why I think even if it's the woman who's religious and the man's not, this is why I don't think it works, because the man's just going to humiliate her publicly like that, right? Like, if it's something that's important to the woman.
Well, he'll just be an ass so he doesn't have to go to church.
But that's a problem to me. I don't know. That seems like a dick move, right? Like, I don't know. It just seems humiliating for the woman involved, right? Like, if the woman is religious, I would want her partner to not humiliate her publicly like that, you know?
In church, yeah. My grandfather was cool. Otherwise, he just wasn't here for church.
I don't know. I just feel like it's important to have the similar value system, even though, here's the thing though, is like atheist men are like dickheads, right? I hate atheist men. So I don't know. I find like guys who don't think that much about religion, who are sort of like agnostic, that's probably my ideal type, or like men who are like ex-religious or whatever. They're usually fine. But no, men who are like raised atheists tend to be like hedonistic, godless heathens, and I don't know, I just don't like them anyway. So, and the other fucked up thing that Kyle said is he was like, you remind me a lot of my mother. I want a woman just like my mother. No!
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, it was bad. Anyways, okay, last couple, Shayne and Natalie.
Drum roll. Yeah, Shayne and Natalie.
Where do we start?
Does anybody else, so pinning it, does anybody else think Shayne's on drugs?
Yeah. First of all, literally the first clip of him. First of all, has he ever blinked at all in this entire show? Like, he always has his eyes like wide open where you can see the whites like all around his iris too, right? He's got crazy eyes.
Yeah, he's an extrovert, but he's like a manic level extrovert to the point where I think he's getting chemical help.
Yeah, he seems like someone who's on Adderall, like, seriously. I actually wrote in my notes for the show while watching it, I said, Shayne seems like a crackhead. Like, that was the first impression of him. And it's crazy to me how, like, everyone else seems fine with him and doesn't seem to have a problem with it.
I'm trying to remember that we know what he looks like and the women don't. Because me as an extrovert, I'm just looking at him being an extrovert. And I'm like, he doesn't have magical powers. He's just an extrovert. But all the women are just, like, falling for his, like, personality. There's a few times where Natalie seemed way over-invested in Shayne than where she should have been at that point. And I think part of it is because she thought his like extroversion was like a
connection
statement on her. Yeah, connection. And that's what I see people make a mistake who are introverts to extroverts. Like extroverts are just like that. Like we're sort of flirty. We sort of like to make connections with people, but it's not necessarily as romantic. It's like some people get way too invested really quickly with extroverts.
I felt so sad for her as well when the guys asked Shayne, you know, what do you like about Natalie? And he was like, the fact she likes me so much. And I was like, oh.
So narcissistic, right?
That's actually exactly what I thought. Like, as I was watching Shayne, my pattern recognition mode, and I've danced with narcissists a lot over the course of my life. My parents were narcissists. I've dated narcissists. I've spent a lot of time around narcissists. And part of my level up journey with FDS was like going to therapy and learning how to like unpack that and like reprogram my brain such that I don't like fall for their fucking shit. Because yeah, or like learning how to like spot the red flags of narcissism. That's like been really important in my dating world because for some reason narcissists are just like supremely like drawn to me. But no, Shayne was like setting off my pattern recognition mode like crazy. Red flag number one was how he was like, oh, I like how Natalie like seems really into me and I'm her number one. And, you know, she gives me lots of reassurance, but Shaina, you know, she doesn't give me as much reassurance. Red flag number two was when him and Natalie, she was being a little bit like sarcastic with him in Mexico. And he kind of snapped at her and was like, can you just be normal? Like, can we have a normal conversation? Like, it was because she said, oh, are you fishing for compliments? Because he was. That's just what he'd do. That's just how narcissists be, is fishing for compliments, right? And so narcissists often do this thing where, like, if you criticize them even slightly or give them a tiny bit of pushback, they'll flip it back on you and try to make it seem like you're the person who has bad social skills or you're the person who's being a dickhead when no, like you're just like Natalie was just being normal and kind of like playfully flirty, right?
He just comes across so massively insecure to me that I thought,
But narcissists are insecure. Like,
see, this is where it gets sticky because like as an extrovert, I would have taken his cue and been like, gave him a compliment, but it would have been kind of like funny, right?
like a backhanded compliment? No.
Not necessarily a backhanded compliment, but if he was like fishing for a compliment, I'm like, yeah, you big burly man or something like that. You know, like something that's kind of funny, but like exaggerated. So he knows he's being a bit ridiculous. So I didn't clock that as a narcissist, tell more so.
No. It wasn't the fact that he was fishing for compliments. It was the fact that when she said, oh, are you fishing for compliments? And then he snapped at her. That was the red flag to me. And then third red flag was the fact that whenever they have a slight conflict, he storms out and it says something really nasty on the way out. Like the first time was when and especially if he's in the wrong for something that's his fault, right? So the first time this happened, it was in there in the pods. He mixed her up with Shayna. He called her Shayna and was like, oh, Shayna is so great. I'm so excited to talk to you. And Natalie was feeling a little bit betrayed because she thought they had this one-on-one connection. And, you know, turns out, you know, he was talking to this other girl and yada, yada. And so she kind of like wanted to see if he was like really committed to her. And then he said something like, yeah, I'm done. Like, this isn't worth it to me kind of thing. And like storms out angrily. And then he did it again when they were in Mexico. Like, I'm done. I'm fucking out of here kind of thing. And I've had narcissistic exes do that to me all the time, where whenever we have the slightest argument and they think that, and especially if they're wrong and they think they're going to lose the argument, they'll storm out, say something really nasty, or like, they're going to like threatening kind of to break up with you or whatever on their way out.
Yeah, he's just like, come on. I'm like, well, come on is not an apology or an argument, right?
Yeah.
He just struck me as an asshole. I'm not sure if like narcissist is the right term, but maybe I just don't know.
Yeah, some people are just assholes.
No, extreme self-centeredness. No, I think he sets off my pattern recognition mode. Like, he seems like the kind of guy, like the more close you get with him, the more like that sort of because narcissists just seem like normal, friendly extroverts at the beginning, right? And it's not until the more you get to know them that you see their dark side. And I see that with Shayne, or like at least the first 5 episodes so far anyways. I'm seeing.
Okay, so I guess we'll find out. We'll start to see what happens in the next 5 episodes. Based on the first 5 episodes, he got roasted online. So on the Love is Blind Instagram, like he's actually defending himself in the comments, or at least like trying to be funny about it, which is actually low-key hilarious because people are just going in on him.
What were people saying?
They're just basically saying, like, he was foul for the way he treated Natalie when he mixed up the names, right? I think everyone clocked that as pretty much a massive red flag. So for me, when I look at how this entire thing unfolded, my biggest question is like, why the fuck does Natalie like Shayne? Because I don't get why she likes him either. Because the first thing is, like I said, I think she overinvested in his personality because he's an extrovert, and so I think she thought some of his rhetoric meant more than it did. And then when he mixed her up with Shaina, he was just like, come on, this is not what I want to be doing right now. And it's like, it's not about you. You offended her. And then rather than like she was sitting there very silently and crying, right? And then saying, I'm upset. I'm being quiet because I'm upset right now that she did it. And rather than just like immediate apologizing and being like, man, I screwed up. Like, I still like you, etc. Like, he immediately was like, you're making this difficult for me.
That's why I think he's a narcissist, because that's how narcissists act in arguments, is they'll do something shitty when you respond in a way that's hurt. What they focus on is how your reaction bothers them or is annoying to them. The idea of, oh, I've hurt someone's feelings just doesn't occur to them because they're a narcissist. They're full of themselves. The only feelings that matter to them are their own feelings. If the other person is reacting to something they've done in a hurtful way, they're not even thinking about like, oh, I've done something shitty. They're thinking like, oh, you're annoying me because you're not giving me attention right now.
So the second reason I wasn't sure why Natalie likes Shayne is because she doesn't like all of his extroversion all the time. Because she even says like, oh, I get overwhelmed, and she had to like take a break. I'm like, if that's annoying now, that's definitely going to be a problem living together, right? Like she mentioned that she's not as extroverted as she finds that situation hard. And I'm like, well, that to me seems like a fundamental incompatibility unless you're going to constantly be living your life separately. Because if you're burnt out on him and you're pretty early in your relationship, I feel like that's probably a deal breaker. The other reason was because of the fact that he was fishing for compliments and she doesn't really like giving them. And I feel like a person, like regardless of not if he's a narcissist or not, but a person who speaks the same language would have just rolled with it. And she doesn't seem like she likes doing that. Those seem like personality differences between the two of them that I think will just grow. Because he doesn't like when she makes the sarcasm thing, and she doesn't like having to think of things on the spot to compliment him, right? That's not her strong suit either. And she doesn't like, she's overwhelmed by his personality, and she's offended when obviously he mixed up their names and he reacted poorly. So I'm looking at it from Natalie's perspective, and I'm like, why are you putting this much energy into this guy who seems like he has fundamental personality differences to you?
Yeah, I'm not, that's the thing, like, narcissist, I'm firm in believing that he's a narcissist because, like, yeah, all the major red flags are there. The other thing is, like, narcissists require, like, constant praise and validation and reassurance. He even said, like, I feed off of other people's energy. Like, other people's energy, I feed off of it. Well, yeah, because, like, narcissists are like a bottomless pit. They're like a black hole. They require you to constantly feed your light and your energy into them in order for them to feel complete. And they never will feel complete, even if you constantly praise them and constantly reassure them.
It's just so hard to tell, like, degree, right? Because your garden variety extrovert likes being around people. They do get energized from people. They can be energetic on their own, but being in a crowd, like, they get excited to connect with people.
But the difference between a normal extrovert and a narcissist is that an extrovert will at least care somewhat about the other person's feelings, like a little bit. Like, I've noticed with extroverts, if they're in a group dynamic and they say something that offends the other person, is they don't want to, like, kind of ruin the vibe. So they'll be like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't mean it like that. Try to patch things up and then move on, kind of thing. And, like, maybe even, like, compliment them back to try to make the other person feel good, right? That's how a non-narcissistic extrovert would act. Narcissist extrovert in that situation, if the other person's, like, offended, they don't think about it in terms of, like, oh, did I hurt the other person's feelings? They're just thinking, like, oh, you're killing the vibe for me. This pisses me off, right? And then they'll try to turn it back on the other person. And the idea of, like, apologizing or trying to make the other person feel good just simply does not occur to them. And that's why I think he's a narcissist. And so, but the thing with narcissists, they also are very charming. They're very, like, that's why I think Natalie likes him.
I didn't even find him charming.
I don't find him charming at all.
But that's the thing, like, if you're like us, where we know what are the red flags to look out for, right? Like, what are the bad things in these sorts of men, how to look out for superficial charm, that kind of thing. We see that and we're like, oh, that's not charming, right? But for someone who doesn't know, like we know, it's easy to get caught up in the sort of narcissist spell.
That's true. So, yeah. So I guess we'll see how the rest of the season plays out and find out and see where this thing goes. Because that's our initial impressions. Obviously, everything's heavily edited, as well as we haven't finished the season yet. So we'll find out how accurate we were.
Yeah, we'll see if our predictions were correct.
Yeah. Or at least, like, if their characterization was fair. So we'll find out in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for listening, Queens. And you can check out our website at thefemaledatingstrategy.com, as well as our Patreon, patreon.com/thefemaledatingstrategy. We have weekly bonus content, and check us out on Twitter at fem.strat. Thanks for listening, Queens. And for all you scrotes out there, I wouldn't pick you if you're the last guy in the pod. Time mad. See you next week. Hey ladies, are you looking for a podcast that brazenly advances women's political interests? Check out Female Political Strategy.
Female Political Strategy is a politics-focused spinoff brought to you by the ruthless minds behind the Female Dating Strategy. I'm Lilith, a socialist.
Elle, a conservative.
And I'm Ro, and I'm politically non-binary.
Join us as we shatter male-crafted narratives on all sides of the political spectrum and spearhead our agenda for a female-focused future.
Tune in to Female Political Strategy wherever podcasts are distributed.
You can also find us on Twitter at Female Political. Until next time, Team Female.